It's no secret that I tend to be tardy to the party when it comes to playing some of gaming's greatest hits. You guys know that I recently played Halo and Kingdom Hearts for the first time, but did you know that there are tons of critically acclaimed games that I have never played? I have never really played Borderlands, Earthbound, Fallout New Vegas, Metroid Prime, Half-Life, Half-Life 2, Portal, Portal 2, God of War, Bloodborne, Undertale, The Witcher, Terraria, Symphony of the Night, Call of Duty, Link to the Past, Metal Gear Solid 2, or Halo 3? So many beloved games that I have never taken off my backlog. Now I really do plan on playing at least a little bit of all those games at some point, but today I want to take a look at the other side of the curtain and talk about the games that I have played. These aren't just any games though. These games are important. These are the games that I love above all others, the games that mean the most to me, the games that defined me. Let's start with GoldenEye 007 was a quintessential addition to any Nintendo 64 library, and for good reason. I had a ton of fun playing the multiplayer in this game with my siblings and cousins growing up, and the story mode was a lot of fun too. This game was also my introduction to the character of James Bond, and he's since become one of my favorite characters in film. I've seen and now own all of the Bond movies, and I have this game to thank for that. Oh, and it's also worth noting that this game was developed by about 10 people, most of which had never even worked on a video game before. It could have fooled me. Another amazing aspect of this game that I don't think gets enough recognition is the music. I could seriously listen to these tracks all day. Also, I didn't realize this until I played the game recently, but there's a song that sounds exactly like the Netflix Daredevil opening. Listen. That's like the same thing. The game is a bit hard to go back to on Nintendo 64 because of the control schemes, so I recommend the Rare Replay version if you want to play it today. I remember when I was really young, my dad wouldn't let us play the game unless we had the paintball mode cheat turned on. But as we got older, we just kept turning it on anyway. It never quite felt like a good GoldenEye session unless the walls were covered in bright multicolored paint splatters. This one's a ton of fun, and it's a classic for all the right reasons.
For the first time on DVD, the original Godzilla series.
I've been a fan of Godzilla for as long as I can remember, and Godzilla Save the Earth was the reason my brother and I wanted an Xbox. This game was a great time for him and I and all our friends. We would spend hours doing 4-player battles, and just like GoldenEye was my introduction to James Bond, this game was my introduction to many of Godzilla's characters like King Ghidorah, Mogira, and of course, my big question is, why hasn't anybody made another good Godzilla game since this trilogy? Godzilla is probably more popular now than he has ever been, but for some reason he's been relegated to DLC and crossovers in other games. There was that Godzilla game for the PlayStation 3 and 4, which was not great, so I'm really hoping that we get a fun Godzilla arena fighter sometime soon. Also, I love this opening cutscene, but I always laugh when the clearly Japanese man in his fishing boat off the coast of Tokyo speaks with a really thick Australian accent. Godzilla! In any case, I'm glad I got to grow up playing this one, and I'm glad that 70 years later, the Big G is still being loved by people everywhere. But we gotta talk about the MonsterVerse at some point because I'm a little concerned about where that whole thing's headed. I know it's not the most beloved entry in the series, but The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess is a very important game to me. This is the first Legend of Zelda game that I personally owned, and I love it. I used to rent this game from Hollywood Video and played through chunks of it that way until I was finally given the game for Christmas and could finish it. My friends and I used to have late night sessions where we would try to solve the puzzles together, and we even had to have my dad help us with the Master Sword puzzle because none of us could figure out how to do it. It also had the most epic final battle in a Zelda game until Tears of the Kingdom blew it out of the water. This game gets a lot of hate for being edgy and dark, and that's exactly what people wanted this game to be. The Space World Zelda demo got everyone excited for a next-gen Zelda game, and when Wind Waker released, a lot of people complained about the cartoony look of that game and wished it had been more mature and epic. Then Nintendo gave us that, and people got all up in arms because a character does this. Yeah, I'll give it to you, that was pretty dark. Good thing no other Zelda games have had dark and edgy things in them before. Give Twilight Princess another chance, or watch Liam Triforce's video on it. It made me cry. I love Twilight Princess. It was an important game to me then, and it's an important game to me now. Pokemon. Just Pokemon. I've been a fan of Pokemon for almost my entire life. I can't pick a specific game. Do I go with Pokemon Diamond, the first game I owned? Do I go with Pokemon Black and White 2, my favorite games in the series? Do I go with Pokemon X and Y, the first video games I ever pre-ordered? I can't decide. I have so many memories associated with Pokemon, and I have a special connection to each entry in the series. I remember my older brother and I doing extra chores around the house to earn copies of Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. I remember getting Pokemon Black for my birthday and taking the game cartridge to school just so I could admire it sitting on my desk. I remember heated minigame battles between my friends and I in Pokemon Stadium. I remember Hey You Pikachu. So much of my life has been connected to Pokemon that to ask me to pick one game that defined me would be impossible. But these ones are my favorites, so pick one of those. Let me tell you all a story. When I was around 8 years old, I became very ill, but because I was afraid of needles and the doctor, I kept it to myself as best I could. That is, until my aunt found me in the bathroom collapsed and basically on the brink of death. I was taken to a children's hospital and found out that I had a severe case of pneumonia. I spent the next week or so in the hospital with my mom trying to recover, and while I did my best to put on a brave face for her, I was actually in a lot of pain and very scared. On the bright side, the hospital had a playroom with toys, puzzles, and a Nintendo Wii. That Nintendo Wii had a very special game you may have heard of, called Flying through space with Mario was enchanting. For a little while there, I wasn't sick in the hospital anymore. I was flying around as a bumblebee or exploring the Comet Observatory. It's not like I was a stranger to Mario games at that point either. I had grown up playing Super Mario Bros. And its sequel, as well as Mario 64, but for that brief period in the hospital, Mario Galaxy brought me a lot of joy and peace when I really needed it. I was also really into space as a kid, and I loved things like Buzz Lightyear and Star Wars, so a Mario game in space was just what the doctor ordered, along with my antibiotics. I never really went back to Mario Galaxy after that, and didn't end up actually completing it until I got the 3D All-Stars collection in 2020. But I'll never forget how happy this game made me for that long, long week. In Night in the Woods, you play as May, a young adult who returns to her childhood home despite thinking she'd be gone for at least a few years. When I first played this game, I was a young adult who returned to my childhood home despite thinking I'd be gone for at least a few years. Yes, I had an immediate connection with the main character, but I also came to love the other characters in this game on such a deep level. They all felt so real to me, and I could relate to each one of them in some way. I loved Bee, the depressed but caring girl who has largely sacrificed her own goals to make sure that her family business stays afloat. I loved Greg, May's friend from school who, despite his carefree demeanor, is full of doubt and insecurity about the future. I loved Angus, Greg's boyfriend, whose terrible upbringing didn't make him cruel or cowardly, but made him kind and gentle. And of course, I loved May, who wants to hold on to her childhood that is quickly fleeting, even if everything she once loved about it is now gone. I relate to all of these characters in one way or another, and that was the main pull of this game to me. Yes, there's an engaging story with a mystery involving the town's past that ties beautifully into the main themes of the narrative, but when I look back on this game, I remember the little moments in between. Going to the mall with Bee to cheer her up, knife fights with Greg, and just hanging out practicing songs as a band. It was exactly the game and story I needed at that time in my life, and has stuck with me ever since. A couple years later, I tried to replay the game and had a harder time focusing on it, and eventually dropped my second playthrough for other things. But hey, sometimes you only play a game once, and one time is all you need for it to stay with you forever. Spider-Man is one of the most important fictional characters to me, and I loved playing Spider-Man games growing up, especially Ultimate Spider-Man. That is a criminally underrated game, but most of the Spider-Man games I played growing up weren't exactly AAA experiences, so imagine my excitement when I saw this for the first time. It looked like everything I never thought I'd get in a Spider-Man game, only it was real. The reason Spider-Man PS4 is on this list is because this is probably the most excited I have ever been for a video game in my life. If you knew me in the time leading up to this game's release, you know just how excited I was. I watched every trailer, I read every article, and I pre-ordered everything for this game. I even sold my PlayStation 4 to afford the Spider-Man model, and that became the PlayStation I used until I got my PS5. And finally, after over 2 years of anticipation, I got the game at the midnight release, and beat it in 3 days. And I remember this empty feeling washing over me after I beat it. Not because the game wasn't good, the game was amazing, but after years of excitement, the experience was over so quickly. And I think that drop in dopamine really affected me, and I was pretty depressed for a while after that. That experience taught me to keep my excitement for things at a reasonable level. So nowadays, I usually try to avoid getting too excited for a game or movie until about a month or so before its release, and that's helped me to appreciate the things I am excited for a lot more. With all of that said, this game was a lot of fun, and I've played it through several times now, but it taught me that with great hype comes great responsibility. The horror genre has always fascinated me, but it was one I largely avoided in the games I played growing up for several reasons. The first reason is that most horror games were rated M for mature, and no store clerk was going to sell The Evil Within to a 12-year-old. And the other reason is that I got scared really easily as a kid. Disney's House of Mouse gave me nightmares, okay? I was not ready to play BioShock. But once I was old enough, I started to really enjoy horror games like Outlast, Until Dawn, and yeah, even Five Nights at Freddy's. But one game stood above all the others for me.
Resident Evil 2.
This wasn't even my first Resident Evil game. I'd played a bit of Biohazard when that one released, but the remake of Resident Evil 2 was what made me a Resident Evil fan. Everything about this game was so engrossing, and just regular gross too. I loved wandering through the environments, managing my resources while avoiding zombies, and bless his corny little heart, Leon Kennedy is one of my favorite characters in video games.
I've sent my right hand to dispose of you.
Your right hand comes off?
Having to meticulously plan a route through the zombie-infested hallways in order to progress using as little ammo as possible while getting chased by Mr. X made this game a terrifying experience. If you want to introduce someone to Resident Evil, or want to get into it yourself, Resident Evil 2 Remake is the best place to start. I mean, it worked for me. Look at me. Now I'm one of those people that owns Resident Evil 4 a stupid amount of times.
And don't make my mistake. If you see one of those things, uniform or not, you do not hesitate.
There, get out. Get out now!
Before we talk about the last game, I want to give some honorable mentions to some other incredible games I love. The Super Smash Bros. Series introduced me to a lot of video games I probably never would have heard of otherwise. Brawl was probably my most played game on the Wii, and Ultimate is definitely my most played game on the Switch. The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword made a lasting impact on me and the way I view the relationships in my life. Also, the music is amazing. Super Mario 3D World helped me through a major depressive episode I had one time. It's a really good game, but that experience meant a lot to me. Alien Isolation was the first game we ever streamed on the channel, and the positive reception inspired us to start making videos again. Despite its rocky launch, Star Wars Battlefront 2 showed me how fun it can be to play games online with your friends. Mother 3 makes me cry. Now then, on to the final game that defined me. You can call me basic, and I probably am. Charizard is my favorite Pokemon, Spider-Man is my favorite superhero, and The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time is my favorite video game. This game and I have been intertwined throughout my entire life. From the early childhood days of watching my dad play it, to playing it myself again on the 3DS, every time I come back to this game, it's like I get to reconnect with every version of myself I have ever been. Young and old, good and bad, noble and cowardly, this game has been with me for as long as I can remember, and it holds an invaluable place in my heart. This is the copy I played with my dad growing up. It's very special to me, and I plan on keeping it with me for as long as I live. I could spend all day talking about everything this game means to me, but I don't want to sing all of its praises quite yet. For years now, I've wanted to make a video on this game's timeless appeal and how it has personally affected me through the years. But every time I've tried to make said video, I've come to the realization that I'm not ready. It's hard to explain, but I have to live a little more life, meet a few more people. I think I have to lose more parts of myself before I'll be ready to meet this game on equal ground. For now though, I can say that if you haven't played it yet, you should. I know it probably won't be as special to you as it is to me, but that's okay. Ocarina of Time is the most important game in my life, and it had a huge part in making me who I am today. To wrap things up today, I've wanted to talk about these games for a long time now, and as previously mentioned, I want to talk about some of them even more in the future. While making this video, I found it interesting to go back and find out which games were not only fun, but had a memorable impact on my life. Video games are important to me, and I hope this video has helped you understand why. I know some people might say, well, it's just a game, it's not important in the grand scheme of things. But in talking with a lot of my friends, we all have at least one game or movie or TV show that has helped us through a difficult time in our lives and made us want to be better people every day. And I think that's a testament of what good art can do. That leaves me with one question. What games defined you?